Nếu mà các bạn có coi tập số 5 môn Second Language Acquisition thì các bạn sẽ thấy hiệu ứng của slide và màu sắc của slide trên màn hình TV 2K hoặc là 4K sẽ rất là đẹp. Đó cũng là mục đích chính của mình là để lưu lại những cái hiệu ứng của slide cho những cái lần làm tiếp theo. Và cảm ơn các bạn đã coi. Mình là Quang, đang là nhân viên tư vấn tại The Eyes Focus. Chào các bạn đã đến với tập 6 lớp thạc sĩ ngôn ngữ Anh. Môn hôm nay mình thuyết trình là môn Language Testing and Assessment, kiểm tra và đánh giá ngoại ngữ. Before I start, I would like to thank Mr. Khánh from the IELTS and TOEIC Focus for showing me how to create the slide effects. In this presentation, I focus on assessing listening as a gateway to language acquisition. Although listening is central to language learning, it is often less visible than speaking or writing. Listening often plays a second fiddle to speaking because it is less overtly observable and therefore harder to measure. Oral production is only as good as one's listening comprehension ability, which means speaking depends heavily on oral comprehension. In a typical day, oral comprehension outweighs oral production in terms of time, effort, and attention. Listening is unique because it is an internal and unobservable process, unlike speaking or writing, which produce tangible output. Listening is an intake process. Listening can be compared to the wind, just as we cannot see the wind itself, but only its effects. We cannot directly observe listening and only observe its result in spoken or written output. Listening assessment forces us to rely on inference. When a student fails a listening item, the problem may be a lack of comprehension or difficulty producing the required response. Although listening is often isolated for analysis, in real-world communication, it is usually integrated with speaking, writing, or reading. Because a single performance can be valuable, teachers should use multiple measures. These can include different task types, and in-class work. To define criteria for listening assessment, the skill must be operationalized and divided into micro skills and macro skills. Micro skills operate in a bottom-up way and focus on small units of language, such as discriminating distinctive sounds, retaining chunks in short-term memory, and recognizing reduced forms. Macro skills operate in a top-down way and focus on larger units of meaning, such as recognizing communicative functions, inferring situations using real-world knowledge, and distinguishing literal from implied meaning. I now move on to 4 types of listening performance. Listening assessment tasks can be grouped into 4 types, and this classification is based on the objective of the task. Intensive listening focuses on perception of language components. These components include phonemes, words, and intonation. Responsive listening involves a short stretch of language, such as greeting or a command. It requires an equally short response from the listener. Selective listening requires processing discourse, such as monologues, in order to scan for specific information. This information may include names or numbers. Extensive listening focuses on developing a top-down global understanding. It can range from lectures to lengthy conversations. Intensive listening tasks aim to assess recognition of phonological and morphological elements. One intensive listening technique uses phonemic and morphological pairs. Learners identify distinctions between consonants such as his and she's, vowels such as leaving and living, and past tense endings like ed. Another intensive listening task is paraphrase recognition. Learners hear a sentence and choose the best paraphrase, which tests sentence level comprehension. Responsive listening tasks assess the ability to process input and respond immediately. In question and answer tasks, learners recognize the objective of a question, such as how much time, and choose an appropriate response while avoiding distractors. In open-ended response tasks, learners write or speak the answer. This increases authenticity but lowers practicality because of the time needed for scoring. Selective listening tasks focus on scanning for specific information within oral input. In listening close tasks, learners listen to a passage and fill in missing words in a transcript. The exact word method of scoring is recommended to ensure that the task tests listening rather than grammatical guessing. Information transfer tasks require learners to transfer information to a diagram or a map. This mirrors real-world tasks and minimizes interference from reading and writing skills. Extensive listening tasks assess macro understanding and inference. Dictation is integrative task and its difficulty can be controlled by the length of the word groups known as bursts. Communicative stimulus response tasks use multiple choice questions based on a lecture or dialogue. Authentic tasks include note-taking, editing, and interpretive tasks. In note-taking tasks, performance is scored based on visual representation and accuracy. Editing tasks involve identifying differences between spoken and written versions. Interpretive tasks require learners to interpret poem lyrics or song meaning. Listening difficulty is influenced by multiple elements. In particular, there are 9 key factors that affect how difficult a listening task may be. These 9 factors include clustering, redundancy, reduced form, performance variables, colloquial language, discourse markers, rate of delivery, stress, rhythm, and intonation, as well as interaction. There is often a tension between reliability and validity in listening assessment. Authentic tasks, such as retelling, usually have high validity. However, they tend to have lower reliability because scoring is more subjective. Memory plays a major role as a confounding variable in listening assessment. When a task requires recalling details after a delay, it may be testing memory capacity rather than language proficiency. Assessing listening involves making the unobservable observable through inference. Although no test is completely authentic, tasks should aim to mirror the cognitive demands of the real world. By using multiple measures and focusing on both micro skills and macro skills, it is possible to provide a valid and reliable picture of a student's true competence in listening.